A door opens in the harbor district before the clerk inside can rise from his stool. No bell rings, no name is offered. The man who enters keeps his hat low and his face beneath its brim, carrying a leather case he never sets down. He asks for the books, and only the books, tracing every entry bearing the name Morrel Son, the way other men trace scripture. He does not haggle over a single figure. At the third counting house, a young clerk stammers that the paper is worthless and bound to fail. The stranger offers to buy it anyway, in full, before the sentence is finished. No one asks why. The francs are real. The receipt bears only a single initial. By evening, the harbor carries a dozen rumors and not one true name. Only the memory of a coat buttoned against a wind too mild to require it, and a question no one dares to speak aloud. What is truly purchased when a man pays more than ruin is worth? The harbor's old inspector keeps his office the way he keeps his memory, orderly, locked, and certain. Papers rest in tidy stacks. A decanter stands untouched, never offered to guests. The Englishman who calls that day asks nothing about ships, only about a name erased from the prison rolls years before. The inspector obliges, settling into the tale as comfortably as an old man settles into a familiar chair. He begins with procedure: the weight, the sack, the hour chosen for low tide so no fisherman's net would disturb what the sea was meant to keep. Then he speaks of the prisoner, a young Bonapartist whose silence made him dangerous, a man foolish enough to think escape was possible. They found nothing, the inspector says with a laugh he would call satisfaction rather than cruelty. The cannonball does what the rope cannot. He pours nothing. He needs no drink to savor the memory. Across the desk, the Englishman remains perfectly still. His hands do not shift. His collar does not stir. Even the line of his mouth refuses to change. He listens without haste to another man's pride, offering no word of disagreement. The inspector returns to his ledgers, his story finished, though his appetite for telling it remains. He offers more: names, dates, witnesses long dead or scattered across distant ports. The Englishman declines them all. He asks only to see the register itself, the page where a name was struck through in plain ink, as though procedure alone could account for a disappearance. De Beauville complies, sliding the heavy volume across the desk with quiet pride in his records. The Englishman turns each page with the patience of a man studying a contract he intends to honor. He notes a date. He notes a signature. Then, between one page and the next, a folded letter slips from the binding into his palm, and from his palm into the darkness of his coat. He closes the ledger and thanks the inspector for his time. De Beauville dismisses the courtesy with a wave, already reaching for his decanter, certain he has surrendered nothing of consequence. He folds the ledger's confession into silence and steps from the warden's office into the white glare of the courtyard. Stone walls rise around him. Gulls cry somewhere beyond them, indifferent to every human secret. A guard nods him through the outer gate without troubling to question his business. His papers are in order, his manner forgettable, his face already fading from memory. The carriage waits where he left it, the horses restless in the heat. He does not look back at the fortress. He has taken what he came to find. Inside his coat, pressed against his ribs, the letter rests as quietly as a held breath, addressed to a name he has not yet spoken aloud, written in a hand someone hoped would never be read again. The counting house of Morrel Son carries the chill of a place that has stopped expecting visitors. Ledgers stand closed upon their shelves, the ink inside them long dry. Behind the high desk, Coakley's bends over a single open book, while his pen scratches through a silence too vast for two men to fill. Emmanuel watches the door more often than the page before him. There are no clerks today, and no porters calling figures up from the warehouse below. The representative of Thompson & French arrives without ceremony, hat already in hand, and a leather folder tucked beneath one arm. He remains standing. Opening the folder on the corner of the desk, he finds the line he seeks and reads it as though weighing iron rather than words. 287,500 francs. The number settles between them like an object placed upon the desk instead of a sentence spoken aloud. Coakley's pen falls still. Outside, a gull cries once above the empty quay, and no one inside the room lifts their eyes. The counting house door swings wide before the latch settles, and Julie is through it ahead of her own breath. One hand still grips the stair rail. Her shawl hangs crooked from one shoulder, unnoticed. Coakley's rises from the ledger. Emmanuel moves toward her before she reaches the desk. Her chest strains for air that will not come fast enough, and the words break apart before she can gather them. The Pharaon, gone down, off the coast, near... She cannot finish the place, only the shape of the loss. Then her voice falls softer, carrying the burden she has brought from the harbor. The crew, every one of them, saved. A passing brig drew them from the water before the sea could claim more than the ship itself. Emmanuel's hand settles on the back of a chair instead of her arm, steadying himself rather than her. Coakley says nothing. The closed ledgers behind him no longer seem the heaviest thing in the room. Julie remains in the doorway, relief and ruin arriving in the same breath, neither willing to yield. The summons comes within the hour, and Penelon arrives smelling of bilge water, his cap turning through hands too rough for grief. Morrel does not sit, neither does Penelon. The old sailor keeps his eyes on the floor, anywhere but the merchant's face, and the account emerges in fragments, like shattered timber lifted from the sea. Off Cape Blanc, sir, there were only swells. By Cape Boyador, she had nothing left to answer with. The foretopmast snapped first, clean as kindling. The pumps could not keep ahead after that. 4 men bailed against water that would not stop. The captain lashed himself to the wheel and refused to leave it. Somewhere in the telling, the cargo breaks loose. The hull leans into an unforgiving sea, and Penelon's hands flatten against the desk as though they still remember the rail. At last, his voice returns. She went down by the bow, sir. 12 minutes, perhaps less. Morrel presses one hand against the desk, bearing weight that cannot be measured. A ship his father named vanished in less time than a walk to the harbor, leaving behind only 12 minutes remembered by the men who survived to count them. The counting house smells of tar and old paper. The ledger lies open to a page that will never balance. Morrel counts coins into rough hands, one sailor after another, the purse growing lighter with every name. They stand in their good coats, caps already removed, waiting for words they have guessed before hearing them. He offers no comfort. "There are no ships left to give you," he says. "I will not keep a man waiting on work I cannot offer." No one argues. No one offers thanks. There is nothing in the room that invites either. Penelon accepts his share last, folds the money twice without counting it, and reaches the door before his face can betray him. Morrel remains behind the desk long after the footsteps fade. The purse is empty. The ledger stays open. The candle burns lower until evening and ruin share the same color. An Englishman sits where Morrel could not sleep, the ledger open like a verdict already written. When he closes the book, he grants the house 3 months. Relief passes through the room before anyone dares trust it. Julie steadies herself against the desk. Emmanuel releases a breath that seems to have waited there since morning. The Englishman does not remain for gratitude. He gathers his coat, then turns and asks Julie for a private word. Leaning close enough that no one else can hear, he speaks softly. "A letter will come, signed by a man who calls himself Sinbad the Sailor. Whatever it asks, obey it without question." Julie repeats the name under her breath. It explains nothing. At the door, he pauses beside Penelon and bends to speak again, his voice lower still. Whatever is said remains between them. Penelon's jaw tightens, but no answer follows. Julie watches the empty street, holding a strange name and an unexplained promise with equal care. Paris has little patience for a man who has not yet fallen. Morrel waits 3 hours in Danglars' antechamber before the door opens, and the warmth inside lasts only until his name is spoken. Danglars studies his own hands before answering. Alone against the house of Morrel is a kindness for another season. This is not that season. The refusal destroys more than credit. Morrel once stood at this man's wedding. Even so, he offers thanks, because contempt is a luxury reserved for those who are not ruined, and leaves past clerks who never raise their eyes. That night he counts every coin and every promise still within reach, hoping the second tally will prove gentler than the first. 15,000 francs against 287,500. He never writes the difference. Some numbers carve themselves into memory without the help of ink. No further name remains to ask. No unopened door waits ahead. Only a date drawing near, and a decision standing where hope once kept watch. The decision arrives without ceremony, the way truth often does. Morrel locks the door of his study and lights a single candle, enough to see by but not enough to be seen. He opens the drawer that has held his father's pistols since before Julie could walk, and places them on the desk, side by side, arranged with the care of a man who no longer needs to choose. He writes no letter. The date on his desk says everything any farewell could contain. He sits with his hands resting open, no longer searching for a number that might still save him. The clock continues without concern. Outside, Marseilles remains a city that owes him nothing. He has spent every fear he possessed. What remains is the stillness of a man who has already chosen and waits only for the appointed hour to arrive. The latch lifts before the knock comes. Maximilian is already inside, still in uniform, half smiling over some forgotten remark left on the stairs. The smile reaches the candle first, then the pistols waiting on the desk. He does not ask what they mean. A soldier recognizes such preparations at a glance. "Go to your sister," Morrel says. "Tell her I loved her better than I ever said it. Tell her yourself." "There will not be time." "Then make time. I will not leave this room with you like this." Morrel's hand drifts toward the desk. Maximilian reaches it first, gathering both pistols in one motion, as though grief itself could be taken away. 300,000 francs by 11, Morrel says, his voice gentler now, each word measured. "For 30 years I have given this house an honest name. I will not give it a morning of disgrace." "Then let it fall. I would rather keep a poor father than bury an honored one." Outside, the clock continues its march toward 11, asking no permission. "Stay," Maximilian says, every trace of command gone from his voice. "Whatever 11 brings, let it find you breathing." Morrel's hand remains suspended for a moment with nowhere left to go. He offers no promise. He simply lets it fall and watches his son carry the pistols away, making the burden of the coming hour just a little lighter. The street outside roars with midday traffic, cartwheels grinding over stone, gulls circling above, merchants calling prices into the wind. Julie hears none of it. She runs. Her shawl slips from one shoulder, and she never pauses to reclaim it. 3 streets, then 2. The clock inside her mind strikes louder than the one above the bourse, though she no longer counts the strokes. On the 3rd floor, a drawer closed an hour before opens once more. Morrel reaches for what his son never found, a second pistol, hidden apart and reserved for this final failure. He lifts it without uncertainty. The weight is familiar from another lifetime and another kind of courage. The room falls utterly still. Below, Julie rounds the last corner. The door comes into view at last, its brass plate catching the light, the step worn smooth by 30 years of his boots. She is close. Almost close enough. The pistol touches his lips in the same instant her hand reaches the door. The door yields before her shoulder finishes the push. The room is wrong, and the dark shape at his mouth is wrong, in a way no thought can fully name. Her hand reaches his wrist first. The pistol falls harmlessly to the floor, stripped of every threat except the terror it leaves behind. Neither of them speaks. Morrel's chest rises and falls like that of a man dragged from deep water. Together they sink to the floor, too shaken to stand. Between them rests the purse she carried without feeling its weight. A receipted bill, paid in full. Beneath it lies a diamond, small enough to disappear within a closed hand, wrapped in paper bearing 3 simple words: Julie's dowry. He ignores the stone. Instead, he reaches for his daughter, holding her with the disbelief of a man astonished to find himself still alive to embrace anyone. She is weeping before she realizes the tears have come. The key fills before the rumor finishes its journey. Hands rise to shield eyes from the glare, but no one dares move. One sail appears, then another catches the light along the horizon, too distant to name and too familiar to dismiss. Emmanuel covers the last 100 yards without his hat, breath arriving only after the words. It's the Pharaon, flying her colors, fully loaded, riding low in the water. Disbelief breaks first. Then something greater sweeps through the crowd like a tide returning to its shore. A ship marked lost in every ledger of Marseilles turns toward the breakwater, her masts unbroken, her hull dark from months at sea, exactly where memory insisted nothing could return. Children climb stacked crates for a clearer view. Somewhere a bell begins to ring, too soon for ceremony and too joyful for alarm. Julie reaches the rail before anyone else. The salt wind loosens her hair, yet she never calls out. She watches the water between them disappear. Rumor hardens into rigging, into rope, into a vessel that should not exist, and yet sails steadily home. Around her, strangers who never knew Morrel embrace one another as though the miracle belonged to them all. For this one moment, grief finds nothing left to claim. Above the harbor, the crowd's joy reaches him only as wind, a murmur thinned by distance, never close enough to claim him. He has not left the rail since the first sail broke the horizon. The spyglass hangs forgotten in one hand. The ship is near enough now to trust his own eyes. Below, strangers embrace strangers. He watches only one man, Morrel, gripping the key rail like a sailor relearning solid ground, disbelief still wrestling with sight. A whisper meant for no ear but the wind. Live, old man. There is nothing left to forgive you. No one below turns. No one was meant to. He folds the spyglass and something in his face eases, a change witnessed only by the deck and the gulls. Then he leaves the rail and walks toward the yacht waiting at anchor, carrying a joy he fashioned but cannot share, alone in a way no rescue will ever mend. The yacht clears the harbor mouth, and the cold beyond it is different, sea cold instead of stone. Marseille fades into smoke, and the echo of a bell that travels no farther than memory. At the wheel, the crew works in the practiced silence of men who have learned never to trouble him with questions. He has left the rail at last and stands at the bow, where no gratitude can follow. His hands rest on the rigging, not for support but because he is unwilling to release the place that brought him here. Only one man aboard is permitted to ask what comes next. He waits until the city has vanished, then quietly wonders what remains for someone who has restored a ruined house and given away a fortune. A long moment passes. The sail cracks once in the wind before the answer comes, spoken without turning from the water. My work rewarding the good is finished. What remains is punishing the wicked. The wind carries the words beyond the man who heard them, and out across a sea that offers nothing in return. The warmth taken from the harbor is real, yet it is the last of its kind. Below deck waits a drawer still unopened, and a page reserved for 4 names, none of them crossed away. He descends toward it without hesitation. From the heights above Marseille, the yacht is no longer a vessel. It is a pale mark against the darkening water, drawing steadily toward a horizon that reveals nothing. Below, the harbor keeps its own hours. Lanterns bloom along the quay one by one. A fisherman mends a net with hands that never pause to look seaward. No one there knows the words spoken at the bow, or the page waiting below deck for ink that has yet to touch it. The yacht neither turns back toward the warmth left behind, nor hastens toward the darkness ahead. Its white shape shrinks to a thread, then to a point, then to the memory of where that point had been.